Could I review margin? So, Christina, the first thing I would tell you about margin, you know, I get weak sometimes, Brian. People ask me, do I have to read the book? I say yes, cover to cover, in as close to one setting as possible, with no notes. And then you're going to have to read it again with a highlighter. So 2 times all the way through, cover to cover. Oh, they're incredulous. They ask me again. Every time they ask me, I say yes. When I get weak, I say, okay, you don't need to read partnerships and margin, because all the test prep vendors, Christina, go total overkill on partnerships and margin. They have hundreds of pages for 2, 3, 4 questions max. And if you tell me, Christina, that you missed your mark because of margin, I'm going to say you had bigger problems elsewhere. And most of them are pretty straightforward. I felt bad, Christina. This person's firm was using Past Perfect, and they wouldn't let her move on to the next unit until she was getting over 80, 85% in each of those units. And she paid me $225 an hour, Christina, to do the Past Perfect margin questions with her on a shared screen. You can find that in my playlist of video replays, and it's called Margin Questions from Hell. And I felt bad saying, we're spending time on things you're never going to see. I also have a lecture, and the title is, Christina, Don't Overdose, on margin. It's not a big deal. I had a Merrill guy. I love when people do listen to us. I said, you've earned the right for all your hard work to ask any margin question you want, and I'm going to answer it. I do think your time would be better spent elsewhere. Now, I'm going to give you, Christina, what I think are the 3 or 4 straightforward questions, and then I will link in a video description of this replay a couple margin resources for you that you can watch at your leisure. And I always say all you don't need to do more than what I'm telling you to do, which is watch that video. I have a margin class replay. You should definitely know the documentation required to open a margin account. You should definitely know the credit agreement, where we tell the customer that he's borrowing money, he's paying interest based on broker call. You should definitely know the hypothecation agreement, where the customer says he understands he's pledging his securities as collateral for the loan, and he's going to have the securities in street name, the name of the broker dealer. It doesn't mean it's a responsibility. Both those documents, Christina, are mandatory. I say, Christina, we have other customers who wish to sell short securities. Would it be okay for us to lend your securities to those customers? That's called the loan consent form, and it's optional. I would definitely, Christina, know the $2,000 trick that you encountered on your SIE as well. The initial in a $2,000 margin account, either pay in full or $2 to $4 grand, pay 2. Definitely would know that. I definitely know 25% minimum maintenance long, 30% maintenance short. I would know the classical margin equation long market value minus debit equals equity. I would know the classical margin equation short, credit register minus short market value equals equity. And I think I got most of those in there. Brian, just for your own edification, I got some real, but by the way, now close your ears, everybody else. This is only for Brian and I and any 24s. On debrief, somebody got asked about margin requirements for levered ETFs. Have you ever heard of that question, Brian? I've never heard of that.
I believe I have. It's been a while.
And it's 20. This is crazy. It's 25% and 30. No surprise. And then you multiply it by whatever the 2x or 3x or whatever it is. So it's great.
That's right. Yeah.
So, Christina, I think that was helpful. Is there anything you would add, Brian, to that margin thing? I saw your whiteboard. Let me just put you in the whiteboard.
I would.
Back away. There you go.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to reinforce exactly what Dean is saying. When Dean and I took the Series 7, back in ancient times, there were 7, 8, 10 margin questions, and the textbooks really haven't cut back from that since 2018. There are consistently 3 to 4 margin questions. Now, I would add 2 things to this. It's so common that everybody struggles with these. It's a relatively easy question, Dean, if you don't mind me usurping.
Yeah, go for it.
The long market value minus the debit balance equals equity. I would go one step further and also know the loan value, which a
Oh,
lot of
for excess and SMA? Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
right? Which a lot of textbooks refer to Reg T. It's simply 50% of the loan value, because that then gives us SMA, which then gives us buying power, which is 2 times SMA. So these are pretty common questions on the
Yeah.
series.
Christina, I got to tell you too.
Yeah.
I get so many people who are in the weeds on SMA. As I told you, Christine, you're welcome to join me in the live stream overtime next Tuesday with a whiteboard. I'll just do some, I call this the initial setup and then a mark to market.
Right.
So we should be able to do the initial setup and then a mark. Brian's point, by the way, Brian, I had a guy in class. I love this guy. I used to slam, Christina, this stuff down your throat. I'd say you need to know all of this with 100% accuracy. Right. When my brother came to work for me, Brian, he said, well, how many questions are there? When I told him margin was 3 or 4, he threw the entire chapter into the trash and said, I'm just going to guess B. I'm going to assign it to the universe. But anyways, I used to teach, I probably spent, I don't know, Brian, 2.5 hours on margin in a Series 7 class. I had a guy named David, and he just really, Christina, I thought the pushback he gave me was good. He said, Dean, I used to start every class, Christina, live class, by saying, what do you want to help in? What do you want to get out of this our week together? And almost always people say margin and options. And then I always say, well, of the two, options are the bigger deal. And this guy on margin, when he passed, he goes, Dean, you did me a disservice. This is before I went to the model 3 or 4, don't worry about it. And he said, I spent all that time. And he said, Dean, I could become a margin clerk based on what you taught me. And I really think I should have spent that time on munis or mutual funds or options. I think that's truthful too, Christina. I think that's truthful. So be clear. Brian and I didn't say you don't need a margin. We said in terms of waiting, do that. And if you want to watch the videos replay of, you got all kinds of things on the channel resources. You have tutoring replays on margin. You have margin class replays. You have a margin lecture. As I told you, if you want to join me next Tuesday night, it's very much like this, except it's a video and you're live. You can actually talk to me. There's a whiteboard, and I'm more than happy to do some margin questions and walk you through.